I gained such a new appreciation for this entire topic of mental health through my personal fertility journey. When you're just feeling so down and so low, kind of your whole life comes to a standstill. So I'm almost, again, grateful to this experience for giving me this new appreciation, almost this new gained passion that I have for talking about mental health, for advocating about mental health, because I really think that that is kind of the foundation that holds everything else, that if we don't have that working properly, or if we don't work on our mental health, that everything else will just, kind of crumble. Hello, and welcome back to the very beginning. Happy you're joining me again today. I hope you're all doing well and happy spring start. I guess now we can officially say that the spring is here. I think it's also the start of the new lunar year, so very fitting to all things very beginning. But yeah, I hope you're doing well. I hope wherever you are, the weather is finally getting better. I think that always makes such a big impact on how we feel. And actually, perfect segue to today's topic, because today I want to talk about all things mental health. As I kind of come to the end of this IVF chapter that I took you through in various different episodes, from stim phase to embryo transfer, on all of these different steps, I just felt like a big piece was missing, or a big opportunity, or like missed opportunity would have been to not talk about the mental health aspect of it, because I think that one is probably the one that people talk the least about, that is the most kind of taboo topic at the same time. But for me personally, was honestly the toughest one. So that's why I wanted to dedicate a whole episode today to really talk about, super openly, super vulnerably about the few things that I struggled with, to hopefully make someone feel a bit less alone who might be feeling something similar, or even if, your experience was completely different and your feelings were completely different. I just want to, contribute my little piece for breaking these stigmas and talking about these taboo topics, because I think it's so very important. Yeah, essentially, I think these ones also really apply even not just for fertility treatments or IVF, even if you're just trying to conceive naturally, right? I think that can also be such a very grueling and long journey. So of course, with fertility treatments, you have the added challenge, let's call it, of hormones that make, of course, all these mental struggles that much more intense. I don't want to say what's worse or what's better, because it's hard to compare here. But I think all of these also really apply to someone who is trying to conceive naturally and just asking themselves different questions, and just kind of struggling with coping on a day-to-day basis. So I think what's also really important, before I dive into kind of the different struggles that I face, and also maybe some of the tips that help me more or less overcome it. In so many of them, I'm still in the midst of it. But I think what's so important maybe to preface is to think about, how even our society views, kind of how we are supposed to deal with challenges and how we're supposed to just overcome things. Because I think when you embark on this journey, and let's say it is an IVF journey, or maybe it's a long natural TTC journey, I think we kind of put so much pressure on ourselves. And I can only speak from my experience, especially also as a woman. I cannot imagine also how it must be for a man, because you can also, influence almost less, because it's not your body, it's not, you're even less out of control. But I think for a woman, as women, we put so much pressure on ourselves to, to succeed, to function properly, to, kind of power through. So what I really came to understand is how important it is to also celebrate that almost weakness, and that weakness does not mean failure, but that you can be strong, but at the same time also show weakness, and at the same time also allow yourself, right, to almost allow yourself to struggle. This kind of sentiment of we have to power through and we just have to get over it. I think it's a very toxic one. So I think, for one, I'm almost grateful that this whole journey that I've been on, or that we've been on, really taught me that it's okay, to kind of really lean in to those so perceived weaknesses, and that they actually only make me stronger. And I think really going into this, I never thought that it would affect me a lot mentally. I never had any anxiety or depression issues, nothing. So even though I was never a person who took mental health lightly, and I was always very, or try to always be very compassionate to other people who have undergone, any mental challenges, I gained such a new appreciation for this entire topic of mental health through my personal fertility journey, because it just really showed me that when up here, things are not working properly, and when you're just feeling so down and so low, kind of your whole life comes to a standstill. So I'm almost, again, grateful to this experience for giving me this new appreciation, almost this new gained passion that I have for talking about mental health, for advocating about mental health, because I really think that that is kind of the foundation, that, kind of main foundation that holds everything else. That if we don't have that working properly, or if we don't work on our mental health, that everything else will just, kind of crumble. Yeah, and as I said, like as I dive into my different experiences and feelings, of course, also disclaimer. I mean, some of this might be a bit triggering, so proceed with caution. Maybe you want to, fast forward or pause, or however it makes sense. I do also reference my miscarriage a bit, so just a bit of a trigger warning. At this episode, I think, is very sensitive. And while, as I said before, my experience might be a bit different to yours, even maybe you've had different feelings, I think my main intention is to really also show that, you are not alone in this. And whatever feelings you might be having, maybe they're the same that I experienced, maybe they're entirely different, that it's absolutely okay, whatever it is, and that you are not alone. Maybe feel you a bit, more seen, feel like, you are okay the way you are, because I think that is just the hardest part when you feel like so isolated, because that's really what all these fertility struggles or these fertility challenges so quickly do to us, right? Making us feel completely like we're by ourselves, we're isolated, cutting us off from kind of society and all of these aspects. So with that, I think it's a good segue to really talk about that first feeling that I've struggled with. Or, I mean, for all of them, you could also say I'm still struggling with, because I think it's all a long, long process. And the first one is really that feeling, that desire to become pregnant is fully taking over your life. That one I think is such a big one, because if for anyone who has experienced it, and again, that could be natural TTC, that could be fertility treatments, whatever it is, really from that moment where okay, I'm ready to be pregnant, I want to be pregnant, or maybe we want to grow a family, I found that it's really one of those things where it's not like you almost like struggle to think rationally. It almost feels like, okay, I'm ready, I want it now. And I want it like, that it works out the next month. And it's like this crazy, crazy feeling. And I mean, some people refer to it as biological clock, or I don't know, your ovaries are on fire. I mean, there's so many like funny references to it in society, but I think it really comes down to, and that's always so hard to explain to people who've never experienced it or gone through it, because it's really so tough to think rationally, because all you can think about is, okay, I'm ready now, let's do this. And I mean, with the physical side, right, there is so much you can do, right? I think I've talked about in other episodes about kind of ovulation tests that I was taking in, my office bathroom, just to make sure that I don't miss that ovulation window, or when going into IVF, kind of doing shots everywhere and anywhere. But that all of that physical stuff, or doing all of these, things that you can't control, was honestly not even the tough part, because that took a few minutes out of my day. Like, that was not hard at all. I think what was really, or what is really, the toughest thing is to somehow manage, or to somehow navigate that your mind is not thinking about it 24/7. And that can be so, so, so challenging, because no matter where you are in your cycle, right? Maybe you are already in kind of the second half, and you're waiting eagerly, like, is my period coming or is it not? Or maybe it's after an embryo transfer, whatever it is. It's so hard to not overthink every little thing that you're feeling in your body, to not just have every single thought, revolve around this one all encompassing desire that you want to be pregnant. And honestly, it really interferes with your life. It really interfered with mine. It made it so hard to stay productive, made it so hard to, kind of stay productive also at work, or stay social, because kind of the last thing that you want to do is then go and hang out with people. Well, at the same time, sometimes that also helps. And maybe I'll go into my tips for this one because I mean, I think what did help is sometimes to almost force myself out of this crazy vicious circle of just revolving thoughts and then go to, that dinner with friends and try to think about something else. But at the same time, sometimes that was also kind of the last thing that I wanted to do. And I knew kind of the one thing that can help me is just taking things super easy in whatever way, that is for you. For me, that means like doing a chilled evening on the sofa, watching Harry Potter, whatever makes you feel good. But that's kind of my, little bubble. And my husband kind of, when Harry Potter's on, he's always like, "Oh, are you feeling okay?" Because he knows that's my remedy when I feel down. But I mean, Harry Potter, I could always watch. I don't know about you, but it's just my go-to medicine for all things when I'm happy and I just want to, watch it, or when I'm sad and I just want to watch it. I'm just a huge Harry Potter fan, but and anyway, like whatever that is for you, I just kind of try to figure out, like, okay, what is it really that I need right now? Is it that evening by myself or with my dog or with my husband on the sofa, eating any comfort food and watching a movie that, makes me happy? Or is it really this like forcing myself out and about and try to be social to get my head mind out of things? But I think at the same time, it's also okay to accept that you can absolutely deny invitations in that during that time to be social. Of course, it's always tricky because it's a balance. You don't want to completely isolate yourself, but at the same time, I think I've also learned or this experience, and I kind of always try to think about, kind of what did this experience teach me? What is kind of like almost a positive takeaway that I can take from this? And I think one of them is really that it's okay to say no, that if I'm not feeling like it, or, that if I know that this will just be too much, or maybe we got invited, by someone who has kids. And like the last thing that I want to do at this moment is be surrounded by kids and be reminded of this, dagger that I have in my heart. Then it's also absolutely fine to say, you know what, not today, or maybe another time. So I think that learning to say no was also a really, really important learning curve for me. And then what I think also at the end of the day, and it sounds so easy and plausible, but really that talking about it. And I mean, exactly what I'm doing now. And I said it many times before, I think in so many ways, doing this podcast or even dedicating an entire season to my kind of fertility chapter is really therapeutic for me. And it really helps me to process it. It really helps me, to kind of reflect on all of these different experiences and also let my feelings out, of course, with the intention to help somebody out there. But in some way, that's kind of really a mechanism for me, a coping mechanism for me. But I mean, it doesn't need to be that everyone out there, now has to start a podcast to get through this. I know that that can be really tricky, and not everyone wants it, and that's totally fine. What just I think I can recommend is just to open yourself up to some friends, some family members, whoever is that close person that you feel like comfortable talking about topics like this, or even talking about those vulnerable feelings that you might be experiencing. I think that can really, really help because, again, when you have this all encompassing desire and that's the only thing you can think about, just, kind of almost letting it out opens out up this like vicious circle, and it just allows those feelings just to get out and just have a little bit of a conversation to someone about it who might give you also a different perspective, maybe tell you how it was for them, or how they were able to navigate maybe something similar. So again, whatever it is, to really break this not only vicious cycle in your head, but also this cycle of feeling isolated and like you're by yourself and like you're the only one feeling this. So I think these were probably the main things that have helped me or are still helping me in this process. The next feeling that is really, really tough is feeling like you or your body is inferior to others and feeling like I'm not good enough. And that one is really, really tough because it kind of takes on so many different layers in your life. I think it all probably, and I was thinking as I was kind of thinking about this episode and even trying to summarize all these emotions into like different feeling buckets, I was thinking about like why does this feeling even come up? And at least how I could, analyze it in my own head is I think it all really narrows down that our society still makes us compare ourselves to others constantly. And I think that's also why I'm so passionate about talking about this, because there's still so much narrative around as women, right? That we have to compete with each other, that we have to compare ourselves, that we could only succeed by kind of defeating others. And I think with this, it's also so important to show up vulnerably and to show up authentically and kind of almost say, like, I'm struggling and it's okay if you're struggling. I see you, you see me, we can hold each other and then succeed together. But of course, that's a really, really long process to really get there, understand it, and to kind of get out of this bubble of always thinking, like, oh, I'm not good enough. Because I think with this one, it it has so many different feelings because we are also raised to believe that, getting pregnant is the easiest thing in the world. And like, I mean, I think it's important that we have some form of sex education in school and that we learn about contraception, and I'm a huge fan of that. But almost to like until the age where then you're ready to, well, maybe like when you get married, and I talked about this in other episodes, when then the kind of things shift and society or your family or whoever expects you now to actually have kids and procreate. It's always like this narrative like, oh my God, just don't get pregnant, like whatever you do. So we grew up almost with this understanding of, oh my God, that's like, it's so easy to get pregnant, so we have to do whatever we can to not until the time is perfect. But then when, the time is seemingly perfect and you want it and it's not working, it's, for me, it was such a, crazy, almost like a crashing against the wall understanding of like, wow, like the one thing that I was told all my life that is so seemingly easy to accomplish, that every woman, that every body is supposed to, so easily do, I can't, or like my body can't. And that just like triggered such a huge Pandora box of feelings and emotions. And especially for me, like I'm someone who always likes to dig deep and work hard, and kind of, I was also raised with the belief of, whatever you want you can accomplish, and that's great. And I have that mentality, and I'm really grateful for my parents to, instilling it in me. But at the same time, it also kind of, for the very first time, I was faced with a challenge where working harder, or studying harder, or trying harder, or whatever it is, that there was really nothing that I could actively or proactively do to make it easier. And I mean, of course, there are certain things that, I could do, and I did a lot of research and educated myself, find the right doctors and so on. But still, that at some point, I just had to really like give up control and to understand that it's like a successful outcome is really not so much in my hands, up to me. And that was just really, really, really tough to kind of, acknowledge that and to be okay with that. And at the same time, right, when you kind of feel like, oh, my body is not working properly, or I'm inferior to others, I think it also makes it really hard when you're in a partnership, and when, kind of you both are ready to have kids. I had also these fears all the time of like, I cannot give my partner what he desires. How is it for him? Like, will he leave me? Will he, stick with me? Like that's a really tough one. And I've talked to so many women who are struggling with fertility who feel the same way, because it's not only you that you're disappointing, and not only your own all-encompassing desire, to get pregnant, but it's also that person that you love kind of most in this world, that you feel like you can't give that one thing that maybe he desires more than anything. So that was just a really, really tricky feeling to feel, to experience, to sit in. And I think here it's really hard, going into the tips, to even say what helped, because here, while I always do say talking is great and I always advocate for it, I think with this one, I just felt like it's sometimes a bit tricky to talk to people about this, because people, when you try to tell them that you're feeling this way, of course, it's also really hard for someone who loves you to hear that. And of course, they kind of automatically want to say something that will make you feel better. So what then happens more often than not is that someone just kind of says like, oh no, like you're good the way you are, you're perfect, don't worry about it. But that doesn't make those feelings go away. So I think what actually did help here for me was just to dive a little bit deeper into those almost like spiritual things, like yoga, like meditations, like affirmations, And even though I wasn't like huge into meditations or affirmations before that, I think they did help me just to kind of work on this, the crux of the problem and that relationship, with myself and with my body, and to kind of, you also like that relationship with control, and just to kind of bit by bit, almost like an onion, to unpack it and unravel it and see like, okay, what is really at the center of it? And then how can we put it all back together in a way that it's not in like a toxic relationship to itself. And I think especially affirmations, there are so many good ones where you can talk, positively to yourself and to your body, and have, not think about, oh, my body sucks, I cannot do this, but actually, be grateful for even any period that comes, for anything that your body is trying to accomplish it, just to kind of try to almost change your mindset into this positive outlook. I think this can really help just, to align your body and your mind in a more positive state. And I talked about this, and I believe the Valentine's Day episode, and I can link it below, about this plant experiment that was conducted about talking positively, how even talking positively to a plant influenced how well it grew and how well it thrived. And I just really, really believe in that, if we are stuck in such a vicious cycle in our mind and such a toxic cycle, that those negative thoughts and feelings that we have towards our body will definitely not help us in the process, and will definitely not help us achieve our goals. So I think that was just the most important lesson that I learned, or the most important thing that I did that helped. But of course, it's so much easier said than done. And it's a constant process. And as all of these, honestly, something I'm still working on, but I just want to give you like a little helpful tip for each of those that maybe, can be a starting point and maybe like a first step in the right direction of healing. And then the next one is probably the toughest one for me. And again, here the trigger warning, because I'm going to be talking a bit about loss. So for me, really, that last one, that is probably the hardest one, was that feeling that my body is not able to get pregnant, or once it did, to stay pregnant. I mean, for me, of course, my miscarriage was something that really triggered this a lot here, because while it did show me that it is actually possible for me to get pregnant, it just opened up this huge can of worms around like, well, but can I stay pregnant? And kind of this whole huge bucket of, well, even if I succeed, what if there's another loss? And this, I think, can be so, so tough also when you're trying naturally. And no matter if you experience loss or not, because in those days when you kind of are almost like ready to take a pregnancy test, or maybe your period is coming, I'm sure you've experienced this if you've been through it, kind of these constant fears when you go to the bathroom that you will see blood. And it can be a similar way, like after an embryo transfer, you just like constantly thinking about this, constantly fearing it. Like every single, kind of when you go to the bathroom, it just becomes such a triggering experience. So that is probably the toughest one for me to constantly still deal with, that question, like, is my body actually able to do it? Is my body able, even if it works, to sustain it? And I think also, um, what makes it so, so challenging is really that uncertainty, that really like the not knowing, like, okay, did it work or not? Will it all be okay or not? And sometimes, for me personally, when even in those months of like trying naturally, I was almost like, oh, I wish my period would just come now, because then at least I'm out of this uncertainty bubble. Because if it's going to come anyways, I just rather it come now, and then I just don't have to be in this like constant anxiety of uncertainty and of fearing like what's going to happen. Is it going to, is it going to come or not? And in terms of tips, I mean, as I said, this one is probably the hardest for me. It's a really, really triggering one. It goes on so many deep levels of, even if you work on the relationship to your body, it's just this whole big, big bucket of fear, of anxieties, of loss. So I think what I did do, or what I'm trying to do, is to almost accept that those fears are okay, that they are part of it, that there's nothing I can really do to make them fully go away. That every month when you're trying, or with every transfer, with whatever you're doing, that they will just be part of it. So to almost not accept from yourself that this month I'm not going to have any, bad fears or feelings of loss or fears of loss or fears that it's not going to work. But just almost to accept that, like, it's okay. Those fears will come, those, anxieties will come, and it's absolutely fine. I'm almost like embracing them. I'm letting them just come in, but then I'm able to, kind of say, okay, and now you can go again. So that's for me. It sounds maybe a bit silly, but for me, that helps a little bit to almost, just accept that they are there. But then at the same time, also tell to myself that, like, they don't define me, or they don't have to define every single other thing that I'm feeling, that positive feelings and negative feelings can coexist. And I think that probably really helps me. At the same time, I think for some people, journaling can really help. I mean, I've tried journaling. For me, it is not something that works super well, but I know for others it can really help, because I think that goes into what I said earlier, that just like letting those feelings out or just writing something down can sometimes just help to, kind of open that valve and just let it out, instead of having it always in yourself. But for me, what does help, and I'm a big, visual person, visualization is just such a big thing for me. So what really help with that is just to, take a few, especially when those anxieties are really big, just to take a few minutes to create like a nice looking vision board or mood board with any, pictures of, nice pregnant women or pregnant bellies, or for me it was like kind of like couples with also the dog, just kind of whatever image you associate with kind of like where you want to see yourself, or like where you want to envision yourself to be when you reach that goal, and just kind of put them all together on a nice vision board. And then what I also usually do is then make them my screensaver on my phone, because that way, every time you look on your phone during the day, you see it. And I just really believe that kind of that power of visualization, of manifestation, that again, and I think that goes into those like positive affirmations. If you see this, and if you kind of almost program your mind to believing in this, then I think it can also become reality. And I think for me, that just really helped, just to have it, present. And especially when those negative feelings came in, just to have something that kind of almost counteracts and helps me to like visualize where I will be, that when I reach this goal, and not even like if I reach this goal, but when I reach this goal. So I think these are the main three feelings. I mean, I could have added so many more here, but I also didn't want to make this episode crazy super long. And I think those three probably summarize the biggest ones that I've struggled with, and also the majority of the things that I did that helped, or that I'm still doing, that are helping me. I hope that they are helpful for you. As I said, every person going through this probably experiences unique challenges, unique feelings. So whatever it is for you, I send you all my love and all the positive feelings, all the baby dust that you get through this. That hopefully you can take away maybe one or two things that even help you grow, but that it doesn't, that those negative feelings just doesn't fully define you and take fully over your life. And I think what's also just important to note here as we come to the end, that it's also absolutely fine, like with anything mental health, to also seek professional health when you feel like, those tips that I talked about, like they don't work for everyone. And while, maybe journaling, meditation, whatever, it sounds nice, but sometimes that just doesn't do the trick. And that it's absolutely fine, that to seek someone like a therapist, a psychologist, and there are even so many who actually even specialize in, supporting people going through fertility challenges, going through loss, going through IVF, going through long TTC phases. So I would just really, really encourage you to reach out to those professional people, because it is no shame in it, absolutely not. And I think it's also absolutely fine to acknowledge and just to, kind of admit that you need help, and that it doesn't matter if, you will have one IVF cycle and you will get pregnant and then you will feel better. It doesn't matter for how long you will feel the way you're feeling. If you feel like, these negative feelings are really taking over your life and you can't function properly and you just need someone to, help you from the outside, then I think please reach out, seek professional help, and prioritize your mental health. I think that is probably my main takeaway with this episode, that prioritize your mental health. It is the foundation of everything. If that one is not working, nothing else will properly function. So yeah, and as always, you are not alone. We're in this together, and I thank you so much for listening, for supporting me, for sending me also feedback. I really appreciate it. Again, if there are any specific topics you'd like to see covered or any questions, please reach out. So thank you so much for listening. Of course, as always, would appreciate if you leave a like, comment, or review, and I see you next time.